The arena lights blazed overhead as Antonio "El Tornado" Rodriguez felt confident and ready. Standing across from him was Manny Pacquiao, just some Filipino boxer in the 147-pound division, he thought, but what he didn't know was that what he was about to witness in the third round would completely change not just his career, but his entire outlook on life. Rodriguez had been preparing for this moment his entire life. Growing up in the streets of East LA, fighting was survival. His father abandoned the family when Antonio was 7, leaving his mother to work 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. By age 12, Rodriguez was settling neighborhood disputes with his fists, earning the nickname El Tornado for the way he'd unleash devastating combinations that left opponents spinning. "Boxing saved my life," he'd tell reporters years later, but on this night, he had no idea that boxing was about to save his soul. The road to this championship bout had been brutal. 18 months of the most intense training Rodriguez had ever endured. 6 in the morning roadwork through the hills of Griffith Park. Afternoon sessions with Big Mike. That left him questioning why he'd ever stepped into a gym. Sparring partners who came at him like they were fighting for their lives. Everything led to this moment. When the first bell rang, everything seemed normal. Rodriguez came out swinging with his trademark aggression, throwing heavy combinations that had knocked out 12 fighters in his last 15 fights. Each punch carried the weight of every struggle, every sacrifice, every dream deferred that had brought him to this ring. Manny danced around the ring with that familiar smile, seeming almost too relaxed for a championship bout, but there was something in his movement that Rodriguez couldn't quite identify, a fluidity that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "This guy's not taking me seriously," Rodriguez muttered to himself between his mouthguard, landing a solid jab to Manny's shoulder. But even that clean hit felt wrong somehow. It was like punching water. The impact registered, but Manny absorbed it so completely that it seemed to disappear into his body without causing any damage or disruption to his rhythm. Then something strange began to happen. Every time Rodriguez thought he had Manny cornered, the Filipino fighter would slip away like smoke. Not just avoiding punches, it was like he could read Rodriguez's mind before the thoughts even formed. Rodriguez would commit to a left hook, and somehow Manny was already moving away from where the punch would land before Rodriguez had even started throwing it. "What the hell?" Rodriguez whispered, breathing hard as the first round ended. His corner was buzzing with excitement. "You got him, Tony. Keep the pressure on. He's running scared." Big Mike was practically shouting over the crowd noise. "He can't handle your power. I saw him wince on that body shot. Go to the body more." But Rodriguez wasn't so sure. There was something in Manny's eyes, a calmness that didn't match what should be happening in a fight this intense. It was the kind of peace you'd expect to see in a monastery, not in the middle of a championship boxing match. Round 2 brought more confusion and growing unease. Rodriguez unleashed everything he had learned in 20 years of fighting. His famous left hook that had dropped Miguel Santos in Mexico City and left him unconscious for 3 minutes. His uppercut that ended careers and sent opponents to hospitals. His combinations that made highlight reels across ESPN and had boxing analysts calling him one of the most devastating punchers in the division. Nothing landed clean. It was like fighting a ghost made of flesh and blood. Manny would lean just enough to let the punches whistle past his chin by millimeters. He'd step back exactly the right distance to make Rodriguez's power shots fall short by inches. And through it all, that same peaceful expression never left his face. Not strain, not effort, not even the focused intensity that fighters usually show. He looked like he was enjoying a casual conversation with an old friend. "This isn't natural," Rodriguez thought, sweat already streaming down his face despite only being 6 minutes into the fight. The crowd was going wild, but Rodriguez felt increasingly isolated in his confusion. 50,000 people were cheering for what they saw as an exciting, competitive fight. Rodriguez was experiencing something that felt supernatural. When he returned to his corner, his trainer, Big Mike Torino, was furious. "What are you doing out there? You're fighting like you're scared. This ain't the Rodriguez I trained. This ain't the killer who destroyed Tommy Morrison. He's different." Mike Rodriguez tried to explain between gasps for air. "There's something." "There's nothing." Big Mike cut him off. "He's a boxer, just like any other boxer. Stop overthinking and start fighting." But Rodriguez couldn't explain what he was experiencing. Every fighter has moments of doubt, but this felt different. This felt like he was in the ring with someone who existed on a completely different level of human development. Then came round 3. Everything changed in the first 30 seconds. Rodriguez charged forward with renewed determination, channeling every ounce of rage and frustration from his childhood, every moment of doubt he'd ever faced, every person who'd ever told him he'd never amount to anything. He threw a vicious combination that should have ended the fight as sequence he'd practiced 10,000 times, until it was pure muscle memory. Left hook, aimed at the liver, designed to shut down Manny's breathing. Right cross targeting the temple, thrown with enough force to knock out a horse. Left uppercut to finish the sequence, rising from his legs through his core and exploding through his shoulder. It was a combination that had never failed him before. But as his gloves cut through the air, something impossible happened. Manny wasn't there. Not just moved away. He had vanished from the exact spot Rodriguez was aiming for, as if he had known the entire combination was coming before Rodriguez had even decided to throw it. And somehow, in the space between Rodriguez's punches, Manny had moved to a position where he could counter. Wait a minute, that's impossible, Rodriguez breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief. But the real shock was just beginning. As Rodriguez stumbled forward from the momentum of his missed punches, he felt something he had never experienced in 8 years of professional boxing and 15 years of fighting on the streets. Complete helplessness. Bout Manny was suddenly everywhere at once, not throwing wild punches or showboating, moving with a precision that seemed supernatural. Each step, each lean, each defensive movement was perfectly timed, as if choreographed by some unseen intelligence that could calculate the future. How is he doing this? Rodriguez gasped, backing toward the ropes. That's when Rodriguez noticed something that made his blood run cold. Manny wasn't even breathing hard. After 2.5 rounds of professional boxing at championship intensity, the man looked like he'd just finished a light jog around the block. His heart rate seemed completely calm, his breathing steady and controlled. Meanwhile, Rodriguez felt like his lungs were on fire. Then Manny spoke in the middle of the round, with 50,000 people screaming around them, creating a wall of sound that should have made communication impossible. Manny Pacquiao looked directly into Rodriguez's eyes and said something that would haunt him forever. "You're fighting the wrong fight, brother." The words cut through all the noise, all the chaos, reaching Rodriguez like they were alone in an empty room. But that wasn't even the strangest part. The strangest part was that Manny's voice carried perfect compassion. There was no arrogance, no disrespect, no attempt to humiliate or dominate. It was the voice of someone genuinely concerned for another human being's well-being. But that wasn't the shocking part. What happened next defied every law of physics. Rodriguez thought he knew. Manny began to demonstrate something that boxing analysts would debate for years afterward. He started showing Rodriguez his own punches before throwing them. First, Manny pointed to Rodriguez's left side with his glove, making eye contact to ensure Rodriguez was watching. 1 second later, he landed a perfect jab exactly where he had pointed. Not hard enough to hurt, but precise enough to prove the point. Then he tapped his own temple with his glove and nodded toward Rodriguez's ribs. Rodriguez tensed, knowing what was coming but unable to stop it. The body shot landed exactly 3 seconds later, timed perfectly to Rodriguez's breathing pattern. It was like watching someone predict the future with mathematical precision. "This isn't happening," Rodriguez whispered, his legs starting to shake. The crowd was going wild, but they couldn't see what Rodriguez was seeing up close. They saw a great boxing match between two elite athletes. Rodriguez was witnessing something that challenged everything he thought he knew about human capability. Then came the moment that broke Rodriguez's reality completely. With 45 seconds left in the round, Manny stopped moving entirely. He stood perfectly still in the center of the ring, arms at his sides, and looked directly at Rodriguez with those calm, knowing eyes. The arena seemed to grow quieter somehow, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. "Come on," Manny said quietly, his voice carrying clearly, despite the noise around them. "Hit me." Rodriguez couldn't believe what he was hearing. This had to be some kind of mind game, some psychological warfare he'd never encountered before. No fighter in their right mind would offer themselves as a stationary target. But there was no mockery in Manny's voice, no challenge or disrespect. There was only an invitation to learn. Something deeper was happening here. As Rodriguez stared into Manny's face, he saw something that shook him to his core. He saw compassion, not arrogance, not disrespect, genuine concern for another human being. The same look his mother used to give him when he came home beaten and bloody from street fights, before she'd patch him up and tell him there had to be a better way. "He's not trying to destroy me," Rodriguez realized with growing amazement. "He's trying to teach me something." The truth hit him like a lightning bolt that illuminated his entire existence. This wasn't about winning or losing anymore. This wasn't about championship belts or prize money or proving who was the better fighter. This was about understanding something bigger than boxing, bigger than sports, bigger than anything Rodriguez had ever considered possible. Manny was showing him that there were levels of human potential that most people never even imagined existed. But the biggest shock was still coming. With 20 seconds left in the round, Rodriguez made a decision that would define the rest of his life. Instead of throwing another punch, instead of trying to take advantage of what should have been an easy target, he lowered his hands and asked the question that was burning in his soul. Who are you really? The arena noise seemed to fade into the background. The lights, the cameras, the screaming crowd, everything became secondary to this moment of genuine human connection in the middle of what was supposed to be a violent contest. Manny's answer changed everything. I'm just a man who learned to see. Those 8 words contained a universe of meaning. Rodriguez felt something shift inside his chest, like a door he never knew existed had suddenly swung open. In that instant, he understood that everything he had believed about strength, about fighting, about what it meant to be powerful, was just the beginning of a much larger truth. The bell rang, ending round 3. But the fight was already over in every way that mattered. Rodriguez returned to his corner, a completely different person than the one who had started the round 3 minutes earlier. What happened out there? Big Mike demanded, his face red with confusion and frustration. You had him right where you wanted him. He was standing still. You could have ended it. The other corner men were equally bewildered. 20 years of training fighters, and they'd never seen anything like what just happened. But Rodriguez couldn't explain. How do you tell your trainer that you just experienced something that science couldn't measure? How do you describe the moment when you realize that everything you thought you knew about human limitation was just the tip of an iceberg? The truth that changed Rodriguez forever. Manny Pacquiao hadn't been fighting him at all. He had been teaching him, showing him that the real battle wasn't against an opponent in the ring, it was against the limitations people place on themselves. Every defensive movement, every counterpunch, every moment of seemingly supernatural awareness had been a demonstration of what becomes possible when a human being removes the barriers between themselves and their full potential. Round 4 through 12 became something unprecedented in boxing history. Rodriguez never threw another punch with the intention of hurting Manny Pacquiao. Instead, he used the remaining time to learn, to observe, to witness something extraordinary. He began to notice details that would have been invisible before his awakening in round 3. The way Manny's breathing created a rhythm that seemed to harmonize with the entire arena. How his footwork followed patterns that were both geometrically perfect and artistically beautiful. The way his eyes tracked not just Rodriguez's movements, but seemed to read the intentions behind them. It was like watching a master artist work with a human body as his canvas. Each round brought new revelations. Rodriguez began to understand that what he was witnessing wasn't just superior athletic ability, it was consciousness operating at a level that transcended normal human limits. When the final bell rang and Manny was declared the winner by unanimous decision, Rodriguez did something that shocked the boxing world and created a moment that would be replayed on sports networks for years to come. He bowed. Not the casual respect fighters show each other after a bout, a deep, reverent bow that acknowledged he had been in the presence of something sacred. He held the bow for a full 10 seconds, while the arena fell into confused silence. Then he stood up, walked over to Manny, and whispered something in his ear that no microphone caught, no camera recorded, but that every person in attendance somehow felt in their bones. Thank you for showing me what's possible. The aftermath was unlike anything boxing had ever seen. The sports media struggled to make sense of what they had witnessed. They saw a dominant performance by a great champion against an overmatched opponent. The statistics supported that narrative. Manny had outlanded Rodriguez by a margin of 3-1, controlled every round after the second, and never appeared to be in any danger. But the viewers who watched closely saw something different. They saw a transformation happen They saw a fighter discover something about himself and about human potential that changed him at a cellular level. Rodriguez knew the truth. He had witnessed the impossible made real. He had seen what happens when a human being transcends every limitation and touches something divine. Years later, Rodriguez would tell reporters in an interview that became legendary. That night, I learned that there are people walking among us who operate on a completely different level of consciousness. Manny Pacquiao is one of them. What he showed me in those 12 rounds wasn't about boxing technique or physical ability. He showed me what a human being becomes when they remove every barrier between themselves and their potential. When they stop fighting life and start flowing with it. When they realize that the real opponent was never the person across the ring, it was the voice in your head telling you what you can't do. Rodriguez never fought professionally again. Instead, he became something the boxing world had never seen. A fighter who retired, not because of injury or age, but because he had learned something so profound that competition no longer made sense. He opened a gym in East LA, where he taught young fighters not just how to box, but how to transcend their limitations. His training methods became legendary for producing fighters who possessed not just technical skill, but an almost mystical awareness in the ring.
The transformation wasn't immediate or dramatic. Charlie didn't give a speech or make grand gestures. He simply talked to other parents about their children's performances. He listened to stories about costume mishaps and forgotten lines. He shared in the universal experience of parental pride. For 30 minutes he wasn't a tabloid headline or a cautionary tale. He was just another dad at a school play.